This meeting is now being recorded.
Experience architecture using agent insights to design a remarkable customer experience. As we prepare to start the webinar, we wanted to remind you of just a few housekeeping items. All participant lines are on mute. If you'd like to ask a question, please do so in the chat box at the bottom left-hand side of your screen. We'll get to as many of those questions as possible during the last 10 to 15 minutes of our time today. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording of this webinar will be available on the PACE website in just a few days. If you'd like to receive the copy of the slides from today's webinar, please do send me an email at chris, C-H-R-I-S, .HAERICH at paceassociation.org, and I'll be happy to send them to you. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker for today's webinar, all-around good guy and a friend of mine, Mr. Jim Ayub. And Jim is the Chief Customer Officer with Etech Global Solutions. Jim has responsibility for Etech's marketing, business development, program implementation, and product development across all of Etech's existing lines of business, those being Etech, Etech Insights, Etech Technology Solutions, and Etech Social Media Solutions. Jim has over 25 years of contact center outsourcing experience in inbound, outbound, chat operations, and social media management spanning across the globe. His expertise includes operational performance management, e-commerce sales, and service with an impeccable track record of innovation and advanced business intelligence. One of his strongest suits is being able to assist customers in launching and developing their world-class customer experience solutions. Jim, I'll now turn the floor over to you.
Thank you so much, Chris. I appreciate that so much. Well, welcome everybody. Hope everybody's having a great day. I'm really excited about talk for the next 40 minutes and give you guys some insights about what CX architecture is, where the market's going, and of course, take a couple takeaways that you'll be able to do immediately. So I just throw my information up there if anybody wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, etc. It's all up there. But today what we're going to talk about is what is this customer experience that everybody's talking about. I'm going to explain to you what the only differentiator that we have as companies and brands is that customer experience. I'm going to talk a little bit about what the difference is from experience and service. We're also going to talk a little bit about this human intelligence and this artificial intelligence and why they both are actually needed to deliver that customer experience. I wanted to give you just a little bit of background about Etech, like how do I deserve or why do we deserve to be up here to talk about it. So a little bit about background of Etech. I joined the company in 2000. We took the company from 400 employees to 3,000 employees in 3 countries and 8 call centers globally. We did all this with no mergers, no acquisitions. Most of our clients are Fortune 50 and above companies. Our company's been set up in 3 business units. Etech, which is our traditional contact center. Insights, which is really our secret sauce, which we're going to talk about today, and including we have our own technology division, which includes application development, AI, and some other opportunities. So at the end of this 40 minutes, before we get into questions, you should be able to take away the need for why we need human intelligence paired with artificial intelligence. It's not about a software, it's about a combination of both. Techniques that we've used to apply to improve this customer experience through human intelligence and leveraging artificial intelligence. And last but not least, I'm going to show you with a case study some of the 360 views of what our customers see and what you should be able to see combining the two. And so why are we here today? Let's look at the trends. As a 30-year veteran in the contact center, I remember the old days. I had green screens. In the old days, narratives were controlled by companies. Unfortunately, all that's transferred to the customer now. Companies have little control over the customer journey. They think they do, but they really don't. Because when we entered the Internet of Things, customers are in the driving seat. And unfortunately, they have a loud voice talking about social media, right? Information is knowledge. Customer service is a fraction of the overall customer experience. To truly lead in customer experience, customer service, whatever you're using as your word, you must focus on that experience. In the old days, customer service was very personal. You didn't care if you waited online or waited on hold for 2 or 3 minutes. Expectations were different. Things took longer, it was okay. Companies purposely lowered the cost to switch to make it easy for companies to leave, for customers to leave. If you look at the definition, customer experience, it's the sum of all the interactions with the customer throughout the relationship of the company. And that's a little different than we think about from the old terms. It's not customer service, it's not customer care, it's not just customer satisfaction, it's a lot of things. When you look at the customer experience, it's not like the donut box, there's no more sampling. This is generation customer experience. You need to look at more data. You have to get off the 1 or 2 calls or interactions you're looking at. So why? Because our industry has changed. Things have changed. These macro trends are driving the world of experiences by 3 things. Digital disruption, it lowers barriers to entry. This changing workforce, it makes it harder to retain talent, as we all know. And this hyper adoption reduces customer loyalty. If you think about this differentiator, in the old days, and I won't date myself, but I have a grandson. Back in the old days, they were like catalogs, right? You remember all those mailers, and I know there's still some out there, but that was the deal back then. It was product centric. And then Black Friday comes along, and all these retailers, it's price centric, right? Like, here's the best deal. If you look at today, I mean, we're talking about, delivery now. I mean, Amazon's talking about drone package drop-off. I mean, and then being able to view the delivery from your Ring camera. Not a lot has changed in the deals about customer experience, but we already know people will pay better for a customer experience. And if you don't think about that, I'll give you one thing to think about. Starbucks coffee, right? Everybody goes to Starbucks. You can make that coffee at your house for about 50 cents a cup, right? You can go out and spend $5. It's the same coffee. You're paying for the experience. And I know with the virus going on now, a little different, but if you think about it, we know that people will pay more for that customer experience. I'm throwing some stats up here. I'm not going to read them all out. You'll get a copy of this deck, but 65% of people are frustrated by inconsistent experiences across all the channels. 84% of customers say being treated like a person, not a number, is very important to winning their business. And 1% of customers feels that our companies are actually delivering that great service. 84% of companies aspire to be a CX leader. But in the surveys that we've read, only 1 of 5 companies actually delivers good or great customer experience. A lot of companies have a long way to go. You need some disciplines. There's 6 competencies to execute. Understanding the customer, designing, measuring, prioritization of what's important, the delivery, and of course, culture. Everything rises and falls on leadership, which is culture. Some of the things that we looked at and all the millions of interactions we're looking at is the #1 frustration customers have during their experience, right? It's simple, long wait times. Number 2, it's hard to deliver that customer experience when you're putting them on hold. So it drives them to switch sometimes, right? Most customers will tolerate a little hold time, but they'll lose patience quickly. Angry callers, as we heard them, abandoned calls, someone hangs up on them. Either way, the result is poor customer experience. It's really something no company can afford to take lightly. If you ask your customers what can ruin the call center experience for them, hold time is usually in the top 3. But once you understand all this by listening, right, when you take that journey and you map it out, you can actually define where to focus on. So by taking all this information, you can see what matters most and allows you to focus on what matters most to your customer, not to what you or marketing or somebody else who listened to 2 or 3 calls from an agent thinks the problem is. There's so much information and content about this customer experience. Sometimes they're intertwined, right? So when you think about customer experience, I think about, what do customers want? What do we need? Are the customers putting in this high effort, which is repeat calls? Is it hard for me to do business with You know, with the evolution of our customer service reps, customers no longer want to feel they're being served by robots. I believe the contact center's attempt to improve the customer experience and customer loyalty still remains flat in a lot of areas because service quality initiatives ignore the primary driver of disloyalty, which is effort. Customers are 4 times more likely to become disloyal after a bad interaction. And when you think about it, the primary reason for this is companies focus on KPIs they believe will help the business rather than focusing on the customers' want. So like when an organization says, hey, you know, repeat contacts, channel switching, transfers, we should reduce those by creating an IVR. Well, that IVR is making it worse for us because we have to navigate through that IVR and you can't do certain things online, right? So that's what really where the industry's going. And by the way, while all of this is going on, we're asking our employees to have 15 tabs open, 4 of them which are frozen, and they have no idea where everything's coming from. So when you think about this, building these communication connections by listening to all this stuff that's going on, you'll actually be able to solve a lot of the opportunities. And so let's talk about right now the machine. Everybody's talking about speech analytics. Everybody's talking about AI. And there's so many different iterations of this concept. Here's the facts. When you recognize the power and the value of customer experience through AI, through a complete process, which I'll show you, that's what's going to help you guys actually deliver this world-class experience. Let me be the first to tell you, machines are very good at sifting through massive data sets. But the lack of understanding of context, emotion, and basic common sense, machines, they don't work that way. That's why when people come and tell you, I'm going to sell you this AI solution, you're not going to have to do anything, going to solve all your problems, run and run fast. Because the biggest powerful thing we have right now is human intelligence. That's really what truly gives you the power and value of a true customer experience. Things AI still has to master, so you guys know, you can never be 100% dependent to adapt on its own, even with machine learning. I'll give you some examples. When you go beyond technology and data to research human wisdom, humans are creative, right? Humans can actually give you process recommendations, coaching recommendations based on operational metrics. So when you think about it, what we always talk about, speech analytics can structure, makes everything searchable, which is awesome. Quickly, human intelligence is essential to interpret those outcomes because the AI is going to tell you 200 million things to look at. A human intelligence or data scientist is going to go in and say, hey, let's correlate this with behaviors. Let's identify the best practices. Let's identify the best solution. That's the true message of AI plus HI. Couple things about the myth and failures. In 2013, IBM partnered with the University of Texas, Maryland Cancer Institute. They developed an oncology expert advisor system. In July 2018, Stat News reviewed internal IBM documents and found IBM's Watson was making erroneous, downright dangerous cancer treatment advice. A Vietnamese company actually claimed that they bypassed Apple's Face ID authentication. And if you think about it, Microsoft, I don't know if you remember this one, but Microsoft created a bot in Twitter a couple years ago. It was called Tay. It actually did machine learning. So what it did was it scraped the entire internet and it became racist and sadistic within 24 hours. They had to shut it down. That's what machine learning does, if not controlled by human intelligence and data scientists. Couple facts. By 2020, 40% of data analytics projects would relate to customer experience, and it's a combination of both human intelligence and artificial intelligence. And also human intelligence cannot be digitized. It cannot be automated, making people extremely more valuable. When you look at some of the companies that do it really well, Amazon, I'm assuming everybody here shops at Amazon. You probably don't know this, but 35% of their revenue is generated by its recommendation engine. Another thing you probably don't know is there's 1,200 data scientists behind Amazon's engine. And today, if you look, there's about 200 jobs open today for a data scientist because that's the people behind it. It's not just the technology. It's not just an engine. There are human data scientists behind that, which makes it work. The other one is Netflix. They have it, it's all bots. If you're using Netflix and you log in and it asks you to watch movies you have no idea of interested in, like when I log in and ask me, because I watch something, I should look at My Little Pony. That's because there's no human intelligence. It still works, but but that's why you have so much in your feed. We recommend you to watch this. There's no human intelligence behind it. AI is an amazing tool. The skeleton in it could unlock previously unimaginable innovations, but it's still a tool. Everybody's excited about this self-driving car, right? We train the machine learning. Google has you doing CAPTCHA. You're literally training their AI engine, okay, on what's out there. Humans are working at the core. CAPTCHA helps train this AI. Those tasks are actually really hard for AI to accomplish, but the data provided by those humans helps Google immensely. I want to ask you guys this. Everybody should be seeing a picture of something. And since we're all muted, you don't have to shout out loud. But I want you to continuously think of this picture that you're looking at. And then I want you to tell me in your mind, what is it? According to Google, with their AI engine with no human intelligence, it thinks it's guacamole. Okay, so that's how some machine learning work. If you look at the right-hand side of your screen, you should be seeing right now a picture of what we think is a turtle. However, Google's AI thinks it's either a rifle or a shield. AI is not always perfect, so when they were created, they have to be tuned and controlled. That's why you hear me so much talk about human intelligence, right? Facebook chatbots, Alice and Bob, all these things that happen. Google Minis, they all work to these things. People is the most important thing about it. And some of you might be saying, hey, Jim, but I'm looking at all these scores, CSAT score, effort score, so I know what's going on in my business based on a small percentage of interactions. The question I would ask for you is, do your customers know what your scores are? And secondly, I would ask them, do you think they care? With all these tools, there's so much data to review from different channels. So what's this common challenge of executives dealing with all of this? Complexity integrating. Executives who strongly influence CX, they're not the owners. They're far more inclined to think training is the answer. About 60% of the people we surveyed says training. 28% of CX owners say that this is a viable, solution with their in-house talent. Given how many jobs are changing and the short supply of individuals with all the necessary CX and AI tools, it's doubtful either of these options could enable companies to upscale quickly enough to meet their 2-year predictions. If you think about it, we talked a little bit about AI, talked a little bit about customer experience. I'm going to get into the nuts and bolts now. We're also going to add customer loyalty on there, right? So we're going to talk about how to build it using AI plus people. And then we all agree customers are important, how we treat them, regardless of what channel. Let's talk about how to get there. First, you listen, identify, analyze, improve, and predict. And I'm going to go through each one of these steps with real data in a minute. When you listen to the said and unsaid. So traditional approaches, right, are, how you handle time. We look at that, hold times, cross-selling, dispositions, reason for call, dead air, right? You got to think about a couple things. Short calls may not have much detail. Long calls may be too costly if there's a huge hold time. But then long calls actually can give you insights into what the agents spent most of their time searching for, which actually can show you where the training aspects would be. 92% of interactions are on the phone. It's about 420 billion spoken words. What we talk about is this iceberg effect. What's visible and what's not visible. So the visible is easy, right? The check boxes. 1 to 5% of people would complain to headquarters, maybe. Maybe 5 to 25% to the frontline person. About 75 to 95% encounter a problem. They don't complain, they just leave. So, what are you actually listening to? When you look at this tip of the iceberg, surveys, QAs done on less than 5% across the board. Social media rarely is responded to, if it's definitely not analyzed. So the big part of this iceberg is, what do your customers tell you on every call? It's not a score, not a sentiment, not an emotion. Sometimes it's silence, right? Other times it's frustration, mention of competitor, anger. When you listen to the entire call and you look at it beyond a checkbox, right, you'll be able to handle this. Most customers share their concern. on all your support channels before they go to social media. And for those of you who follow me, you've seen me the battle on social media where I fight with a brand. I've already tried to fix it on multiple times and they refuse to help me. So when you said about the said and unsaid, the customer experience approach, all that stuff we talked about is important. So the cool part about it is this is just a snapshot of what a digital interaction looks like. So I know exactly 100% beyond a doubt what the customer said and what the agent said. And we build the categories around this so you can see customers dissatisfied in that part of the call, you know, channel switching because they said, I'm calling you because I was on your website, you wouldn't let me do this. So when you think about the agent opportunities, handle time, dead air, incorrect hold procedures, all those things, they're all important, but there's so much more insights you can pull from this. When you identify with the platform and you ask the right questions, whether it's a KPI, problem solving, effort, or competition, it allows you to look at data that gives you successful behaviors. So we prioritize behaviors based on success probabilities. We determined what behaviors are most strongly correlated with the converted calls using a linear regression modeling. So in this example, after listening to the best of calls and hundreds of thousands of them, we know for a fact that the highest statistical sampling rate is going to be the coefficient value of a 0.94. The closer you get to 1, the better it is. But you're basically 3 behaviors: asking for the sale, creating an urgency, and handling objections. Now, when you use AI and human intelligence, now you're actually to go in and look at, remember, we analyzed, hundreds of thousands of calls. I know what the objections were from the customers, and I know what the agents did, who provided a rebuttal, who didn't. I know which rebuttals worked. We know which ones didn't work. So if you look at it, now you're actually able to give the agents specific information on what's working, what's not working, versus our coach telling them, well, you really need a rebuttal. Now I can give them the rebuttal, which I'll show you. We also know by demonstrating these 3 behaviors, right, that we just talked about, we can take a close rate from about 16.3% to about 52%, right? Effort driver C was confusion. Effort driver A was transfers. And of course, asking for the sale is one of the ones that we talked about. And we all say we do it, but we really don't. When you further take this data down farther, you can actually do a rebuttal effectiveness. When you do that, you're actually seeing customers, right, that are agents that are doing it successfully with certain rebuttals. And now you can show your agents specifically what other people are doing that are having better success, and you can write the scripting for them. One vendor in this study, so lost $552,000 in potential sales just because they weren't asking for the sale on 80% of the no sales calls. And we know that that's a one that works. When you look at call back later, this is, ineffective and effective rebuttals. And we're doing this based on hundreds of thousands of calls we put through our AI platforms. So we know which ones work. So we know which ones are ineffective, which ones are effective. How important is that to get back to training? And this is when the customer said not interested. When the customer said, I got to call back, same information. We know which ones are effective. We know which ones are working. Now you're able to actually create practical applications for your agents that tell you the tactics. And then you give them 3 or 4 different ways to look at it. And by doing that, you're able to actually let them put that in their own words, right? And, you take it from there. So for the example of the predictive modeling, successful behaviors do increase revenue. We've already proved all that by sales effectiveness, and we're looking at conversion rates, and we've actually proved this model out. So when you think about data, everybody talks about big data. 70% of the customer feedback is already on your calls, your chats, your social media. 1% is probably what we're listening to. I mean, if anybody's on the call that actually runs call centers, when you get on that calibration call, you listen to one call with an agent and your client or the call center, and you basically say, oh my God, that call was terrible. Oh my God, we have to train everybody on this process. Well, you have the data. If you look at it and use it, you'll find out some of them really aren't that important. Everybody talks about data. Everybody talks about dashboards. Dashboards are cute, okay? But it's too hard to look at dashboards and actually drive impact. That's why we use data scientists. If you ever hear the phrase, usually in a lifeboat situation, water, water, water everywhere, nothing to drink. It's the same here. You get this data everywhere, oceans of data, millions of data points. It's impossible for you to quench your thirst because you have nothing conclusive. It's a bunch of dashboards. So, what you're missing is that entire story and how each of those stories is related. When you talk about data cohesion, it's relatively missing. So let's look at the science behind it. That's a JSON file. That's raw data coming out of an AI engine. And where your cost associated with the total quality management program or AI program, that's where your program can start to skyrocket because you're going to have so much data. And then now what you want to do is take that data into a strategic call center data. And then from there, you have this thousands upon thousands of lines of data to decipher. This is where the human intelligence, or what we call as a data scientist, they have to have Python skills, right? Most of the applications are open source, so it's pretty easy to get a certified data scientist. But understand these jobs cost anywhere from 100 to 150,000 a year, depending on market and location. But the cool part about the science and software is you can get your ROI if you create data scientists. In my experience, I'm not knocking anybody in IT, but most of the IT guys weren't really, they did good. I won't say they did bad, but when you get ops people and teach them how to use the data, it's a lot easier for us because they actually create recommendations. And then what they do with that data is now you take this data, so I'll go through this. This is predictive analytics. So now you take your data transformed. So I know for a fact on 200,000 calls, this is what was happening. And I'm just going to show you one example here. So this is an inbound reservations company. 31,021 times the customer said, yeah, this is really good. Let me call you back or talk to my spouse or whatever that is. What we found was with the best performing agents who were actually closing these sales is they created urgency. And what that sounds like is, oh, I understand you're looking at this property, but this is like the 5th call I had today. I can't guarantee you the same rate, blah, blah, blah. If you do that, we know, blue to blue, you have a 36% chance of closing that sale. Now, the cool part, if you're a couponer, you can stack coupons. Think about this. If we also say this property's being scarce or whatever, there must be something going on, and I'm guaranteeing you the lowest price, now you take your 36 and 26, add them together, you're at 62% possibility of converting that sale. And what does it all mean? So all the data I just showed you was on 170,000 phone calls. And what it allows you to do, if you look at this scorecard, because I don't believe in checkboxes, I do believe in scorecards and effectiveness ratings. What I know here is it's red, green, and yellow. So I know for a fact that I have to work on, did the agent mention hotel name and address, right? That's a huge opportunity. Now I can target coach, and I can get this data down to the agent level. So the other benefit of using data like this is I can now go to specifically an agent and put a class together of 10, 20, whatever the number is, and specifically focus on the behavior they're struggling with, instead of taking the guy who's got the best sales presentation in the world, making him go through a bunch of training that he doesn't really even need. At the end of the day, this customer we talked about had a 33% revenue growth. We decreased his hold time by 22%, which, by the way, allowed him to handle 31% additional calls without adding staff. We increased his conversion rate by about 2 percentage points. We increased the effectiveness scores by about 8% in about 90 days. And we decreased cancellation rates by 3%. This was about $500,000 incremental revenue, and it's about a 2,000 basis point improvement for this particular client. So I know what you're saying. Good deal, Jim. That's all exciting. Why change now? Well, let me tell you why. We're going to redefine this 10-year challenge. This 10-year challenge that was out on Facebook. Amazing, these people took pictures of them 10 years ago and 10 years today, and most of them had filters on, so they look better than they did 10 years ago. But let's talk about the old days. Remember the virtual assistant, chatbots? This was back in 2019. But if you look at 2009, you had to pick up the phone, right? Remember when you had to actually talk to somebody? So now what you're looking at to the right, now what you're looking at is you don't want to do that, and these virtual assistants aren't as good. They've come up with some cool bots. You can use, and we're actually using right now, we're using AI to train these bots to have a more human experience. So it's pretty cool stuff. What happens if I don't evolve? That's what you got to be asking yourself. A lot of these companies had the opportunity to evolve. I will tell you one of my favorites is Netflix, right? Blockbuster could have bought out Netflix 20 years ago for $50 million, I think it was. You know, and you know, Blockbuster didn't focus on that. I mean, look at Netflix today, and if you want to talk about vision, you understand Netflix started with giving you a CD in the mail. Their ultimate vision was always the stream. Because if you think about when they came out prior to 2000, what were we calling the internet? It was called the net. They were always thinking, and they followed through everything, hence the name Netflix. But they knew they had to get there in steps. So it's a pretty remarkable story. And some of these other ones that are going downhill are because they haven't evolved to what's going on. And you can see what's happening today just in the evolution of what's going on with this coronavirus. I mean, the reason the stores are out of stock is not because there's a shortage of supplies, so you guys understand. Most of those companies are using automated ordering systems based on the inventory in the store. So there's no human intelligence behind that, and that's one of the reasons you're seeing shortages and stuff. There's no shortage of toilet paper, I can tell you that. The problem is it's the ordering systems because they were all automated with no human intelligence. So some of the benefits companies would like to realize by embedding this AI into their experience, you have growth benefits, operational benefits. I'm not going to bore you by reading all this. I'll tell you a couple of things off the top of my head. Implementing AI, we predict what customers want before they even know they need it. I mean, how positive is that? AI can reveal these insights that help employees rapidly make informed decisions that impacts that customer experience. It helps them from refining that overarching CX strategy to provide real-time responses to customers' inquiries and questions. Companies can integrate AI into any customer-facing experience or device customers can interact with, so you understand. Chatbots, robot, doesn't matter. And AI can automate a lot of behind-the-scene processes, you know, like targeted automating marketing promotions. How powerful is it if you use the data intelligence from what your customers are saying to make personalized one-to-one marketing? That's the future. We can control outcomes in your business. We're empowered to predict and offer resolutions. The crystal ball's here. The future gets happen. The new way to work is to embrace this technology, but don't become it. Machine learning is lost without the people. In a world driven by tech, people matter more than ever. Yes, this is a picture cartoon of me. That was me when I was at Dun & Bradstreet. Prior to 2000, I had a big computer and I was working on a green screen. As the time evolved, I lost my hair, I got fatter, of course, and I got a laptop. The job I was doing in the 90s is the same, right? What's changed? The customer's expectations have changed, and that's what we have to evolve to. We focus on customer experience. We tell everybody, I'd focus on the tools and some of the steps you got to remember. Know your customer. And how you could know your customer is by capturing all that metadata, those conversations, those millions of conversations. We're only looking at 1-2% of them. Know your ideal experience, and don't think about it in a boardroom. Bring your customer in. Talk to your customers. Look at what everybody else is telling you.
In healthcare.
Develop a customer experience. Monitor and evolve, and of course, ongoing refinement. Don't think this is the Ram Patel rotisserie. It's not set it and forget it. It takes ongoing refinement. The tools, if you're using customer surveys, I don't want you to think that I'm against surveys. I love surveys, but you're only getting part of the picture. The average response for a survey is 5 to 14%. So you're basically making all of your decisions based on biased data. So when you overlay the customer surveys with all the analytics from all those other phone calls where people just tell you everything that's going on and they don't fill out the survey, you can use those. If you're using scorecards, they're cute. You got to mind stuff. But I would encourage you to actually take a little look at your check boxes because at the end of the day, if you're not delivering the experience, right? If the customer or the agent said the name throughout the phone call, for an example, that's a checkbox. Did it deliver the experience? What was the frustration level? I can show you hundreds of forms that I've looked at in my career where the agent did everything according to the policies, but the customer basically said, drop that, I'm not using you ever again. I'm going to tell everybody about this experience. but they still scored in the 75 percentile because they followed all the policies. That's why you got to look at scorecards differently. Data mine, the data's there. Okay, you have millions of phone calls, all the data's there. Believe me, customers tell you everything you want. And then we talk about what technologies. We have one we created called QEval. It's our own proprietary software. It incorporates the NEAI platform. It just makes the data better. It just looks it out. But the question is, do I need AI? Do I need human intelligence? I mean, I tell everybody, walk before you run. I would start small if it were me. And then that's just like we did when we developed all this. We started small. We didn't do 100% of our calls. We actually started small, got the processes, refined them, and then grew. Because growing, as we all know, in the contact center business is easy. Everybody who was on this call is going to get a copy of our book. Matt Rocco, our president and CEO, myself, published recently. This is Delivering Customer Experience That Matters. Talk specifically about what matters to all of us. With that being said, I wanted to leave plenty of time for questions. If we have questions, or I'd be happy to answer them for you. And with that being said, I'm going to pause now, and we're going to see if I can see the chats coming in with questions.
And I will just remind everybody to ask questions of Jim. Just use that chat box on the bottom left-hand side of your screen. And Jim, I actually got some that came through to me via email. So I think somebody's having a problem with the chat box. So the first question is, what's the most common mistake you see leaders make when they try to launch an AI-based performance management program?
Oh, that's a great question. So everybody knows I came from ops. So I didn't wake up one day and just start running the customer experience. I actually started as an agent. So it's pretty funny as we develop this, they focus too much on the numbers and not the behaviors. Everybody focuses on the score. The number is only this indicator of how effective that behavior can be. So if you're really trying to modify behavior, right, with just the number, you're not going to see the improvement. So what we've seen and taught our leaders is the ability to interpret the number as a behavior and focus on the behaviors that are important to the customer, which would drive the customer experience.
That's fantastic. The other one that I have is, what's the first thing you need to know about using big data in call center or contact center operations?
Yeah, another great question. So this is another fallacy that people talk about. First of all, big data and call center operations and AI, nothing's perfect. Okay, there's going to be gaps. Okay, the biggest thing that you can do on AI is actually, build smart scripting and phrase captures, right, to actually help those analytical gaps. So if you think about it, because I've argued with this at Etech, some of our leaders here, where, they'll say, well, it wasn't 100% accurate. It was off. And I said, listen, let's just say I'm off by 10 percentage points. The behavior is listed as effective 47% of the time. Do we both agree? Even if I'm off by 10%, it's still not where we need to be. And that's when we talk about focus on what matters. If someone's running at about the 80% effectiveness, right, no one's going to question that. But what they do is they question all the real behaviors. And, if there's an issue in the bottom, right, that's kind of what ends up happening. They'll come to say, right, they'll say, hey, I don't think this is right. And then that's one of the things that we did, to fill those gaps. Nothing's perfect. Even if you listen to your calls 100% with human beings, you're still going to have opportunities because it's subjective, right? And that's the key that everybody has to understand in AI. The difference is when you use AI, you build those scriptings and you're always fine-tuning that engine, you're going to be much more accurate and you're looking at much more data.
That's interesting too. I like the way you put things. It's making me smile.
Thank you.
Does AI or speech analytics require 100% of my interactions? That's a good question.
Yeah, that's one that we see all over the board, right? So if you talk to a speech analytics company, they will tell you that, we recommend putting 100% of your interactions. Jim, you personally, in our best demonstrated practices, no. We think smart sampling is the best way to go because you can get intel, right, to manage cost. There's a couple of things like, so being in a PACE environment, right? So if we're talking about compliance, if my exposure for saying something to a customer has the potential impact of a $10,000 fine, by all means, 100% of your volume should go through, because it's the risk versus the reward, right? If I'm trying to just modify behavior, no, because think about this. Even the people that are that are listening to this today are getting, maybe 1% of you're listening to 1% of your calls manually. Over time, you're going to get the information. The difference is with AI, if you do 70%, right, you're going to get it quicker. And a lot of times what we do with our customers is we start at 70%, and then after about 45 days, we drop it to about 50%. And then after about 6 months, when things are fine-tuning, looking good, if everything's running really good, we'll drop it to about 30% and then do spot checks. So again, I don't agree with 100% sampling. I think the reason the industry says 100%, besides the compliance thing, is because they know that their systems are going to be 80 to 90% accurate at best, right? So what you have to remember on that is to build a bell curve, just like we were in high school. And that's what we've done. We've built bell curves. So we know that it's only going to be accurate 80 to 87% of the time, depending on what language it is. And you're building bell curves in there, so you're still getting to be accurate. But we're not a big proponent of 100% unless there's a compliance or fine associated with it.
I'm going to just take a sidestep with that, Jim, because I was just thinking about this, and I'm not sure if it's possible or even plausible. But are there things that you can do from an AI standpoint to check for compliance or understanding? Do you know what I'm saying? Like if the agents are talking about something, or if they're getting questions based on something that might not be clear. Does that make sense?
I think so. So let me rephrase. So there's a couple things that we do from a compliance standpoint. So as an example, a lot of our clients, if anybody ever mentions the word lawyer, suing, presidential escalation, those keywords are grabbed instantaneously and programmed to send out a text message immediately to stop it, right? So you can actually get off the social media part of it. The other things we're talking about, so for an example, I mean, we do a lot of compliance. As you know, certain states that we call into, and I don't know them all because I'm not in compliance anymore, but there are certain states that you have to say, two-party consent, for an example. Yeah, you can absolutely use AI to tell you who did it, who didn't. Same with the recording statement, right? A lot of people are using automation now for recording statements, but not everybody has that capability. So those are things that you can absolutely identify 100% of the time. I've done one recently for a law firm where they were saying that they wanted to prove that the customer gave consent for calling them. And if you think about this, there's consent. So what does it sound like? Well, we created like 20 to 30 different categories of different scripting that would sound like consent. As an example, is this the best number I can call you at? Yeah, that's consent because the person says yes. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And that's interesting because they can be, that helps on all sides of the spectrum too, because you're worried about the, like you said, the compliance side with the fines. And if you're able to garner some of that off of there, that kind of makes everybody's job easier.
Oh, absolutely.
I do have one more question that came in. So will AI ever replace human quality management?
So great question. So anybody who's Googled me or looks at me, I can tell you absolutely not. I mean, I have been very boisterous in the industry, despite all these AI companies I work with. The machine is the eye. Just remember that. It makes it searchable. It makes it easy. If you have data scientists, yeah, you don't need human beings, but you still need the human being, if that makes sense. The person is the brain behind it. See, in Jim's opinion, in my experience of managing these programs globally, AI gives you that visibility into the data, but really it takes people to make the data actionable. Like I think about my own call center. We have 3,000 agents. I can go tomorrow and drop a survey. They'll tell me 100 things wrong with our company, as we all know. But the real value comes from an analyst to tell me, here's the data, here's what you need to do, and here's how you fix it. And that's where I believe human intelligence will never automate quality assurance 100% if you're trying to do customer experience. If you're only doing this to pass time and to check a box to say, did they do this, yes or no, all means you can replace your human beings by that. But so everybody understands, when Etech used to do this manually, we had about 200 people manually listening to calls. Did I drop my head count? I did in manually listening to calls. But what we created was more job opportunities for more data scientists and operational metrics people. So we didn't remove any of the employees. We gave them new roles and trained them on new skill sets. But technically, yes, my human manual intervention stuff reduced by about 50% on most of my programs. But we didn't get rid of anybody. We redeployed them, if that makes sense. So you will save headcount to pay for it, because obviously at the end of the day, that's what has to happen. But there's no, I have not seen anybody successfully replace all the human people behind just buying a speech-to-text program yet.
Well, that makes sense, though. And you're going to get, you'll, like to your point, though, you end up, I don't want to say getting more for your money, but for lack of a better term, more for your money, because you're able to analyze a lot more different aspects of your business.
Absolutely. And the advice I give all the people who are looking at AI, or if they have AI, or they just want to get a better ROI, don't let the customer, or don't let the company that you're talking to, whether it be a Calabrio, CallMiner, or whatever, all of them out there, Tether, a bunch of them out there, don't let them tell you the goals. You need to tell them what your goals are. That's the one thing in the tech company world, right? They come to you and sell you this dream that we're going to replace and improve customer experience. At the end of the day, you got to say what's your goal, and because there has to be an ROI. And the big fight in the industry now that I'm hearing about is sales is easy. Like I showed you guys today, the sales experience, easy. $500,000 in 90 days. It's a no-brainer. The customer experience one, a little harder ROI, right? Because what is the lifetime value of that customer if you keep them and retain them? Those are the ones that you really got to work on ROIs differently. And just be cautious about that, because most technology companies will tell you that, you know, there is no other cost. That's not true. So if they're selling you a system for $1 million, and I'm just throwing numbers out there, $1 million, just remember, it takes people to run them. They're going to teach you for the first 30, 60 days how to use their platform. That's what they usually do, and then they walk away. So remember, you bought a technology and you have no one to help you run it, because it's not automated. It's not the rotisserie. I can tell you, it's not set it and forget it. So keep that in mind as you continue on your approach. And I have a lot, by the way, I have a lot of content on my LinkedIn profile that I've written about this. It's all free. Feel free to grab anything you guys want if you're looking at something like that.
And this is the last question that's coming from me again, just as you were talking. So I get the whole part of you can't set it and forget it, but knowing how things change, like even you were talking about how we were focused on price compression and then customer experience and customer journey, and even the compliance side of it. How often do you suggest that people go and review what they're focusing on with AI and make adjustments for it so it stays up with the current business needs?
Yeah, great question. So what Etech does when we're talking to our clients, we give them dedicated resources. They have a dedicated data scientist, 8 hours a day. That's all they do is fine tune those engines, make sure it's going on, looking at everything and giving them ideas. So I'll give you a real example. A lot of our customers are moving to a remote workforce, as you could imagine, right? So you might think of this as we're moving remotely. That's, you know, we're going to do this. So I can't do anything else. Well, our data scientist comes in from a different aspect. We reached out to every one of our customers who's moving to at home, and we changed all the categories to say, let's listen for, I can't hear you. You're not coming across right. I'm sorry, the voice was garbled. So why do you think our data scientist is looking for that? Because I'm trying to find out if the bandwidth connectivity the person said he had, and I know we tested it, is it working? Are you having issues with connectivity moving this person to home? It's just one example. And they did about 25 different aspects of this whole COVID-19 stuff. And one of them I know off the top was specifically about customers being able to understand, hear, delays, echoes, all those type of things. Because you know, if you were in the call center, you didn't have any of these issues. And if you went home and now you're starting to have these issues, now you know you got to identify, is it the internet connection? Is it the computer they're using? And then you're able to decide and give the customer data back at the agent level to where the opportunities are. That help?
Well, yeah, it helps, but that's going to spawn another question for me. Sorry.
Sure, that's okay. No, you're good.
Monopolizing the questions. So especially talking about COVID, that obviously it's going to things have to adjust rather quickly, right? So how quickly can adjustments, I know you guys have a dedicated person there, but how long does it take usually to make adjustments when you adjust what you're listening for?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, absolutely. So it's really not too much of an adjustment. When you think about this, here's what's happening. So all of these calls are being ingested into an engine, which are transferred to text, which makes it searchable, right? So I'm getting the calls with almost real time. Soon as the agent dispositions the call, I have it call and process within 5 minutes. So a data scientist can go in like right now. It's almost 12 o'clock. They can look at all the calls up till 11:45 and see what's going on and do keyword searches and say, tell me who's talking about the word virus as an example, or this, and look for words before, work for after statements, right? And then you can pull up how many times it's happening. And then they create a new category, right, which takes about 20 minutes. And then they reprocess all those calls from this morning, which takes about 10 minutes. They just reprocess all the calls we just went through, right? And then what that does is puts those new categories we built in into the scripting, and boom, puts out your data. So relatively easy. But remember, that's why I talk about that's why I talk about human intelligence. Now remember, if you're the IT guy running the company, you're trying to keep us up. So you're not going to be able to go in and do all of that stuff, right? It's going to be this is on my task list. When I have time, I'm going to get to it. That's why I tell people all the time, definitely, you know, if you want to outsource it, you can outsource a data scientist, but you know, if you are getting into this, you definitely need a data scientist to do all this work.
That's so interesting. That it goes, and especially something like where you're experiencing now, that's great that you can make not real time, but almost real time adjustments.
And by the way, you can get real time. So here's the difference in that, which is a big fallacy. So I had the opportunity to do real time. There's a cost associated with it because you have to take your servers up, right? You got to put everything up a lot quicker. So I'll go with within 5 minutes, I'm fine. But like literally, there's people talking about, you know, giving the information to the agent at the point of it's happening. So when a customer says something, your AI engine can tell you that's not the best thing to say. Here's the best rebuttal to say. Yes, that technology exists. But if you remember my slide I showed you, there's 19 browsers open on this agent's desktop. Now you want to give him a whisper to him and tell him what to say? You guys are crazy. I used to be an agent, right? And that's why I say almost real time.
I love that. I love that. Well, I think that's about all the time that we have for today and all the questions that we have. Jim, I want to thank you again for this informative webinar. As I said, the recording of the webinar is going to be available on the PACE website in just a few days. If you haven't heard, the PACE 2020 Annual Convention and Expo, or what we refer to as ACX 20, we actually moved it, and it's now going to be held August 23rd through the 25th at the Omni Island Resort in Amelia Island, Florida. Details about it can be found on the PACE website, and should you have any additional questions about it, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Again, Jim, thank you very much. We hope to see the rest of you at another PACE webinar, national, regional, or chapter event very soon. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time today. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much, everyone. Bye-bye.